Hey y'all, and welcome to the first of the 12 consecutive holiday tutorials we are doing for the 12 days of Christmas. We hit a huge milestone of 15,000 subscribers on YouTube. So to show you how much I appreciate each and every one of you, we are also going to do a giveaway a day with these tutorials. You must be part of the Brittany Barnes Boutique Tumblr art group to enter to win some of the prizes that these amazing companies have given to us to give away, as well as some custom tumblers and gift cards from myself. So let's go ahead and get started on this really pretty Christmas tray. I found this ornament-shaped wooden tray at Target for like $5. So I grabbed up a few of them, and I got this mistletoe glitter from PDB Creative Studio a while back, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to use it on. It does contain some of those crushed glass fragments, so I didn't necessarily want to use it on the tumbler since that is pretty chunky bits. So I decided to use it on a tray, and it would be absolutely beautiful for molds as well. Just mix it into your epoxy and pour it in, and my gosh, this glitter makes a huge statement. So I went and grabbed my closest colorfix paint that would match this glitter. Rainforest is the green paint color that we used, and this tray has some, I want to say, curved edges, so it's not like sharp corners around the side of it. So I did have to go in with a smaller paintbrush and sort of fine tune around those edges, I guess you could say. But these paints are really good to paint on top of wood since it is a paint, primer, and adhesive in one. Normally I only need one coat on top of any wood projects that I do, since the wood sort of like soaks it in and it just gives excellent coverage, and I don't have to worry about washing or sanding any of my wood projects to get any oils or residue off, because this paint is a primer as well, and it covers all of that up before I add my glitter and epoxy. I dried that up really quickly using my heat gun on low heat setting, and then we're going to take some epoxy and use that to apply our glitter. The reason that I chose the epoxy method for this glitter specifically is because of the chunkier bits that we have in there. I didn't want to use a glitter glue, although I do feel it probably would have really grabbed a hold of that glitter. I just wanted to make sure it was really stuck since I was not going to seal this before we added on our first coat of epoxy. I am using the ARTISTRY 1:1 ratio fast set epoxy, and as you can see, it had already started to set up because I was working on other projects. So I had a little bit of a difficult time getting it stretched out around this board, but you do want a very thin coat. And I tried as best as I could to keep the epoxy just where my paint coverage was. I didn't want the epoxy to go up on those edges, so that it would minimize the amount of sanding that I had to do after we added on our epoxy. I did not want to have to get close to those wooden edges with any sort of sandpaper to remove any of the stain that is already on this board. So I just dumped some glitter in the center of the board, shook it around until we got great coverage, and then knocked off any excess. I did go over this with actually the backing from my transfer tape. It's really slick, so it's a good way to pat down some of your glitter, especially when working with sort of like an awkward surface like this. Since we used the ARTISTRY 1:1 ratio fast set, after about 45 minutes of allowing this to set up, I went in with our first coat of epoxy. There were a couple of those bits that floated to the top, so I did end up sanding and adding on another thin coat before we were ready for our decals. This is a white element sheet from Gracefully Created. I will have all of the materials that I used listed down below, as well as some coupon codes for you, but I just trimmed each one of these out that I wanted to use on the board. The white elements are printed on clear vinyl, however, they do have a layer of white in behind the decal. So when you place these down on whatever project that you're working on, the image itself is going to stand out and the clear will disappear once you add on another layer of epoxy. You do want to get kind of close to the decal just so it minimizes the amount of like pressing down that you have to do and focusing on that clear area to make sure that it doesn't show under epoxy. So you don't have to trim all the way up against the decal, but definitely trim off a little more than I did. So you have less work that you have to do, and avoid touching the clear parts. You have oils, and in my case, I always have glitter specks and some sort of paint stuck to my hands when I'm working in my craft room. So avoid touching those clear parts, because if you get anything on them, then you will be able to see that through epoxy. So on the back where you can see the white, it is safe to touch in those areas because of course that will be covered up by the decal or image itself. I'm going to place all of these just randomly on my board, and then we will trim off the edges along the side of the ornament shape, and then we will go back in and just really press down all of those clear edges around our decal images so that they will disappear after we apply our epoxy. If you have any little bubbles or anything like that that pops up underneath your images, you can use a craft blade to puncture a tiny little hole in your vinyl. I usually try to pick somewhere where there's a dark line, so where you can see where those little dark lines are in the flower details. I would just try to cut on one of those just so I could push that bubble out from under and you won't be able to see it in the color detail. Or you can take a vinyl weeding tool that works really well, and it makes a teeny tiny little hole just enough to push out the air from underneath that bubble. The Artistry 1:1 ratio facet epoxy can also be used for top coats, and obviously it can be used for larger projects as well, as long as you are doing very thin coats. Of course, the more you mix, or the more volume you have in your mixing cup of fast set epoxy, not just this one, but any fast set epoxy, it is more prone to flash curing, which means it will start setting up super fast and you will end up with a clump of hard epoxy in your cup really quickly. Same as if you attempted to use a fast set epoxy in a deep mold. it will also flash cure on you, and it won't look as good as using a regular epoxy for that. However, since we are using a very thin coat to cover our glitter and also on top of this board, it is possible to use a facet, and it is awesome because it helps me get boards like this done very quickly. Just make sure if you are mixing a large amount, one, of course, you get your ratios correct and you mix quickly and get it onto your project quickly. I'm saying quickly a lot, but you do have to be fast, people, okay? So just get it onto your board really fast, and then you will have time to spread that epoxy around since you have thinned it out by pouring it onto the board. I very carefully pulled the epoxy around the edges, allowing it to go sort of up the edge but not over the edge. That way, once it starts leveling itself out, it will have a very nice border around our tray. And since we did talk about mixing our epoxy really fast so that we can get it onto the board if we are using a facet, I wanted to show you how well those bubbles that may be created from mixing quickly, there I go again with that word. I think it's just satisfying to watch those bubbles rise to the top and pop on their own. But we are going to sit this down and run it over with our torch to help those bubbles rise to the top and pop so we have a nice crystal clear final coat. I originally had planned on doing a peekaboo with this board, but I'm really glad that I decided against it because these decals are just so beautiful on top of the mistletoe glitter. It just pulls everything together and screams Christmas. This is a really beautiful item to have in your shop and really easy to make. There was only a few steps and would make a perfect gift. All the materials that I have used will be listed down in the description below for y'all, as well as some coupon codes. Do not forget to join the Brittany Barnes Boutique Tumblr art group on Facebook so that you can enter to win the incredible giveaways that we are having for the next 12 days. That is all for today. Thank you all so much, and we will see you next time.